incidents of theft and break-ins at Job's apartment complex, where even tenants' cars were vandalized. Although the court acknowledged his remorse and clean record, the judge said the law must be upheld, especially after the maximum sentence for gun possession was recently doubled to 20 years. This comes as the government plans to introduce stand your ground laws. A committee led by Minister of Homeland Security Roger Alexander will draft the legislation aimed at giving citizens legal rights to defend themselves and their property during home invasions. A penal businessman has won a legal battle over the long-term detention of 9 luxury vehicles seized by customs in 2020. Justice Nadia Kangaloo ruled that the continued holding of the cars without charges or legal proceedings violated Kesudan's rights. She granted summary judgment, ordered the immediate return of the vehicles and documents, and ruled that damages must be assessed. The state was also ordered to pay legal costs. Kesudan's lawyers said 17 vehicles were seized in a 2020 raid, but only 8 were returned. After 5 years without charges or forfeiture action, the judge called the state's delay unjustified and its explanations vague. The businessman is seeking over $725,000 in special damages for depreciation and financial loss, as he had intended to sell the cars through his business. The Ministry of Social Development is enforcing new accessibility measures across all its facilities. As of May 26th, each building will include 2 designated parking spaces for persons with disabilities and proper signage. The move is part of efforts to comply with long-standing accessibility standards under the National Building Code. The ministry is also calling on the private sector to follow suit to promote inclusivity. Advocacy groups have long pushed for public buildings to meet these standards, which outline requirements for ramps, restrooms, doorways, and signage. Hundreds of refugees in Trinidad and Tobago are still in limbo 8 months after their planned resettlement to the United States was suspended. Many, including families with children, say they sold belongings and left jobs in preparation for their move in October 2024, only to receive a last-minute suspension call from the International Organization for Migration. Since then, they say they've had no updates, and some are struggling to feed their families or send their children to school. Work permits have not been renewed either, with immigration officials saying they are part of an approved resettlement process. Both the UNHCR and IOM have been criticized for poor communication, while other countries like Colombia and Ecuador are rerouting refugees to places like Canada and Spain. Those in TNT say they've been left behind. The UNHCR says it's aware of the hardships and has urged refugees to seek help from the Caribbean Center for Human Rights. Well, that's news to the hour on WESN. I'm Naomi Magnish. Thanks for watching.
WESN.
I find it interesting that not a lot of people think it's important about the property tax money. From the point of view of the PNM, former Minister Imbe tried to say that the whereabouts of the 135.6 million, is not that important. It's senseless because it just went into the consolidated fund. So my arguments about the government's stance on the matter and actions on the matter notwithstanding, I find that very ironic given how the PNM lost the election, that the minister is trying to overlook a very important detail, that the property tax was technically implemented under the PNM so that it would go directly to local government bodies in order to pay local government bills, in order to provide local government services. And somehow the minister thinks, oh, nothing to see here, it went to the consolidated fund, like the critics were afraid of happening. because it kind of defeats the purpose, right? It's almost like if he doesn't understand, he is acknowledging the incomplete nature of what was already an unpopular tax, that at the very least, they gave a somewhat reasonable justification for its existence, but now he's acknowledging that justification technically did not exist, and it never did. And then, of course, now it leaves the PNM open for questions about, in the long run, would it never have been implemented? I guess we'll never know. Now, Sean Michael Small is to talk about the WSN packed show today. We actually have two guests this morning joining me. Usually he would be with me every Friday, but you know, given the fact that it's a holiday, we kind of bumped him up, and he arrived today. And I am speaking, of course, of disaster management expert Ashraf Ali, retired inspector of the TTPS.
Good morning, Sean, and to the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. Happy Indian Arrival Day in advance. Right, I know because of yesterday's our public holiday, and strange enough, I didn't tomorrow I didn't even know.
Yeah, it's
so
one of those. It's one of those
just
things.
some of those things,
you know.
And I mean, like we were discussing, working in customer service and tourism industry and Ministry of National Security and police. Sometimes holidays really come and go. So
you spent like a whole lifetime's worth of a career studying holidays. A few years.
It's just a day, but it's a day in Trinidad and Tobago. So there's a lot of things that happen. There's a lot of things happening.
Yeah, I think also there's so many public holidays, I lose track of them just in general. Well, because it's almost like one is always on the horizon.
So we have a number of public holidays that public servants and even law enforcement officers can take. And one big thing that came out of our discussion was I would use the word very cautiously, sometimes the abuse or the misuse of what we consider to be sick leave requirements. Mm-hmm. And there was a lot of conversation by the minister, Mr. Alexander, as well as the commissioner who commented on it.
Yes.
And the reality is that in every organization, there will have persons who would try to beat the system and take advantage of the system. But that should not be the overall context or the concept of all persons within an organization. I think that sick leave requirements is part of the organizational agreement. Right, you are legally authorized. You're legal. It's legal to have that and to use it. The challenge sometimes you face is some persons, because they are entitled to it, they believe they can use it whenever they feel to, and however they feel to, and that sometimes puts other persons in an organization at a disadvantage.
But this is one thing if you're an office worker, or you're a fried chicken, fast food, bigger fast food worker, or you know, you're doing, any kind of job. If too many people are out on sick leave, the remaining workers are going to be under pressure. But policing, the stakes are different.
Yes,
you know, we're not talking about longer wait times to get your meal or to get whatever paperwork done or whatever office. So we're talking about this could impact police response or the ability to respond.
There's a lot of implications when persons misuse or abuse the sick leave entitlement that they have. Secondly, when they do that, they add additional strain to the officers who are working, and with that, it means that the ability to serve. Provide the service, you're no longer able to provide that effective service. And we all know that the organization itself is short-staffed and staffed, and the police has been under some, even in the best of time, the public still does not have a good trust and confidence in the organization. Even though the statistical data that has been presented shows that there's a decrease in the homicide, there's a decrease in sexual violence and offenses against the children. So there are some positives, but those positives are always overridden by actions of the police officers.
I want to go back to a statement you made earlier where, you know, all organizations will have people that want to kind of take advantage of the situation, you know, push the boundaries or even cross the line, right, depending on what they could get away with. And I think this is something people kind of need to understand. Any healthy organization could become unhealthy. And it's not about, oh, well, just hire good people. There's a part of it is human psychology, especially when it's a high-stress job.
Yes, exactly.
Right, where you'll be like, no, well, I want to take time off if I can, right? However, I had to game the system. Because there have been, if you read enough anecdotal stories of various servicemen around the world, of when things break down, they kind of do the best they can. Of course, there will be people with fully bad intentions and people with not so much bad intentions, but any day. And part of it is, it comes down, I think, to leadership. It's not just about the people who you get. Yes, you want to recruit good people, but even if you recruit good people, if the system is kind of broken, then, you know, behavior and following the regulations and doing the right thing, that's just going to break down over time. Just give it enough time, it'll break down. But leadership is what keeps it together and allows it not to break down, because it's almost like a vicious cycle. You take time off, puts more stress on me, and the more stress on me, and I see and you get away with it, encourages me to repeat the behavior because I am too stressed now, so I can't keep up. So I take time off. So when you come back now, you're in a situation where I'm not there, so you get more stressed, and that's just one way to build, whereas good leadership could kind of keep the situation stable so that everybody could manage better and still deliver.
And this brings to the forefront whether the organization is treating with critical incidents and critical incident management. Because, let's put it this way, absenteeism, abuse of sick leave, the inability to provide the relevant service that is required to the public, are we not saying that those three key areas that adds to the trust and confidence or erodes trust and confidence in the in police service and how the public view it, the organization will be is not in a critical or crisis situation. We can't look at it from one perspective alone. There's a multitude of things that would put the organization in a crisis situation, and managing all of that is very important. You have to understand that there's only so much an officer can, because he or she is a human being. Every single day, they are doing the same thing over and over, coming to work, doing the same thing over and over, listening to the same cries of the public, being treated in the same manner. I mean, yes, there are persons who come out and say, well, hey, you get paid to do that. But from a service industry, personally, as you have been in, if every day somebody come and criticize every single action that you are taking as trying to provide service, and you know you come out trying to provide that service, and every single thing you do, there's something negative. At some point in time, you need to de-stress from this whole environment. You need to take a day off. You need to cool your brain, because it is not something that you could continuously take on a regular basis. And it is exacerbated in the police service because one inappropriate action by one officer that doesn't represent the entire organization, but at the same time, it reflects on the organization. Every one of the officers will feel it, because the public now watches you and what one does, and it's worse than one bad apple.
Yeah. Well, as you say that, I want to switch gears slightly, because first of all, yes, there has been a reduction in murders, and there's enough information to say it's a bit of a trend, both when you compare to May 2023 to 24 to now 25. There's been, well, let me not say that, because it went up in 24, but it reduced significantly between last year and this year, from 52 murders to 23 murders. And I guess you could look at the trend of the year. We are now in the 5th month. The murder rate is relatively lower. So I would say a moderate decrease. It's not It's not that we've eliminated the problem,
No, we are.
right? But I don't think it's fair to say it's a minor increase either, because 23 meters is kind of low for the average. When you look at when we've for the years that we've crossed 600, you know, if you had a month that was 23 meters, that would be quite low. That would be well below the average level.
Well, when you look at from my information here, 2024 up to this time, up to the 20th of May, we had 53 murders on record.
Yeah.
At that time, it was 26. That's roughly close to half.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, roughly close to half. So, between 45 to 50%. I love 45. And that is a very good. That's a positive outlook for Trinidad and Tobago, not the police service alone. I am simply saying that's a positive outlook for Trinidad and Tobago.
I guess I'm kind of hedging my bets because the expectation is that the crime rates could potentially come back up unless there's something proactive that's maintaining the status quo.
And how volatile the crime, we know how volatile the crime rate on a daily basis could be, that we could get a spike and a very drastic spike on a regular basis. So that is why that's why we had the concern with the number of police shootings recently.
So that's, as I said it, I had the question, like, could it be, because I am sure there's a significant subsection of the population that will applaud this if it is true, that aggressive policing that has led to an 80% increase, reported 80% increase in fatal police shootings, I believe, right? Or at least in incidents, in police shootings. Could it have had an impact? Because I think at least in some cases, there was a situation where they intercepted a stolen car. It was stolen in Diego Martin. They intercepted it somewhere east of Port of Spain. I can't remember where. 2 injured, 1 killed. So it's not like the police went in guns blazing to take out everybody, right? But you get into a gunfight with police, you know, you're lucky, 2 of you lucky to live. I'm just saying, that's how I see it, right? So, and that kind of interception and that kind of immediate confrontation on certain crimes, now, and at least in examples like that show criminals, hey, you know, we actually might not get away if we do this, so maybe we should reconsider.
So you have to look at it from both sides. It could be argued from both sides. Increase could mean over-exuberance of the officers and not utilizing the use of force policy in the manner in which it's supposed to be used. There's an argument for that side because you went straight to lethal, not doing escalation. That's an argument on one side. On the other side, you can say that the police, the law enforcement officers reacted or reacted in an appropriate manner, and like you said, dealt with the situation in a manner in which was. So we have to look at it, whether we accept, it's how we look at the 80% increase.
The increase could be just because, well, more criminals are more brazen and they shoot at the police.
What would be, exactly, because we know that there's a proliferation of high-powered weapons out there, and any engagement of this nature would or possibly result in shootings and injuries and possible fatalities. The other issue here is now, with that 70%, 80% increase, I would like to know what is the outcome of those 80%? If it is,
it might be fatal shootings.
No, I'm not saying fatal.
Oh, you mean?
I'm just saying whether or not the final result
from
the investigation finish, if they were just shooters. If it turned out to be, and I'm hopeful that a percentage and a high percentage of those turn out to be that officers have been placed before the courts for unlawful or discharging the weapons and held culpable, it means it is a negative connotation. It's a negative slant for the organization in that they abuse the excessive use of force.
Now, just to say, we're looking at something like 27 incidents versus 15 incidents. So it's not like 80% increase. It's like we went from 100 to 180. But it's still significant, right?
But then we are still mid-year.
Yeah, that too.
All right, and we now crossing the first quarter.
One of the things I wonder, and I thought about this in a previous police shooting, not the police shooting that happened yesterday or recently, but the one with the farmer, is that for some of the criminals, they might not actually believe it's real police. Because there was a recent shooting where, based on the reporting isn't clear, but someone with a bulletproof vest marked police, ran after the victim and shot at him 20 times, right? I'm pretty sure the police wouldn't bother shooting at someone 20 times and just run after someone blatantly to kill them. That's the impression I got from the article. The article has some grammatical issues, at least what's online right now. But it made me wonder to what extent sometimes the criminals think to shoot first and ask questions later because they're not entirely sure if this is legit police that's going to arrest them, or as is suspected in some cases, it's fake police come to outright kill them, and if you surrender, you're basically giving yourself up to be killed.
And that is the real a reality that legitimate law enforcement will face. The confrontation between rival gangs who sometimes purport to be police officers, dressed like persons resembling a police officer. And let's be real.
That's why they shifted the uniforms and a bit more hard and fast.
Yes, so the uniform was hard. The original uniform, which is the blue and gray and all the other tactical. But we have the issue of whether or not a bulletproof vest could be constituted, construed as, or misconstrued as, is that a legitimate police? Because anybody can get a bulletproof vest and buy a police emblem
it's
or
Velcro
tag
or something.
Right.
No, it's not even an emblem, it's just the words.
Exactly.
You could get that, you could find that around the world. It's
because it doesn't initially signify Trinidad and Tobago Police Service or anything identifying the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service or any other policing legitimate police organization.
But also, I'll never forget the reports where, at least in one case, they found counterfeit uniforms and what was deemed as authentic uniforms. The implication is they were taken from police stocks. So they don't even have to make fakes. They could potentially just get the real thing.
Exactly. So those are real risks, and I'm saying that when we have to manage those type of risks, more information that is available to the public is important. And this is where we come straight to the question that we were discussing earlier, the use of the body cams.
Yes.
Right? Whether or not you can, the public is entitled to see, the public is entitled to get footage from the body cam or not. Whether it's illegal or not, if it would, how you should say, cause prejudice in a matter, or if a matter is before you have a court. If a matter is before the court, is okay. But I am still saying this: the public at this point in time has no confidence in the organization and the use of the body cameras, because up to this time, I can safely say that there has never been any body camera image shared to the public to how you should say, not discredit, but give a different perspective of an incident that took place.
Because that's half of the value of the body cameras. Yes, there's the investigative value of having video evidence of what happened. But part of the value is you have something objective that the public can't say, oh, well, the police gave false testimony here. We want to believe that these officers are corrupt. And rather than, because you don't need body cameras to have an investigation to clear whoever of whatever. But if you reveal footage to the public, then the public basically is like, who wants to say that this was, I understand AI video is possible, but we're not there yet where you're going to be able to fake something like that seamlessly.
You will always have persons who have conspiracy theories, and that's fair enough.
But the undecided opinion.
Yes, but because everything is shared via social media on this form, time, and you only get snippets.
It's some snippet of a video that causes the public to make assumptions,
and it is only based on the recorder's perspective. What I want
More
to
importantly,
share.
and I think you are alluding to this, the unwillingness, it seems, for the public, because I think it's even the PCA that is complaining that they're not getting body camera footage, right? I hope I'm not misreading the article. But whatever the reasoning is, the fact that the public can't see it, the impression that it leaves, the implication that it leaves to the public is, oh, well, you're trying to hide something.
And this is what
That's fair, right?
This is a lot of inferences. A lot of persons would make inferences, and the less that you, and these are what you call critical. As I just said, is the organization in a critical or a crisis management, see themselves in a crisis management mode, because all of this and sharing of information and critical information that can give a positive direction towards an organization and transparency to any organization, and dealing with any incident, transparency is important. So
Yeah.
this has nothing to do with
Yeah.
the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service alone. It's about dealing with any incident.
Because we have a wider national societal issue with transparency.
Yes.
So it compounds what is seen to be a lack of transparency with the police. And I think, is it fair to say that, look, the TTPS is one of many institutions that's kind of behind where they should be. So they, in a way, they have to do as much as possible to ensure transparency. There's not a lot of wiggle room.
Sometimes, exactly, and sometimes you get some media releases and information, snippets of an incident where realistically you can give a little more information to the public, so the public would not be asking or left to be questioning what really transpired.
All right, so we have to take a break. Would you be able to come back for calls?
Yes, I would.
Okay, so folks, we're going to take a break. We're going to welcome our next guest, switch gears on the conversation, and then, of course, after 9, we'll open up the phone lines as usual. Let's talk about the WSN. We're back. Stay tuned after this.
Her voice has mesmerized us for years.
And now, in a rare treat for music fans,
Shakuntala and Friends in concert, featuring Shakuntala Jangbahadur, singing sensation Deval Chaiklal, brilliant musician Dr. Shivanan Maharaj, master flautist and saxophonist Narendra Maharaj, with music from Shiv Sangeet Orchestra. Shakuntala and Friends in concert.
Shakuntala, Tala.
Struggling with heart health or frequent migraines? Discover the simple steps to reclaim your energy and vitality.
We're diving into a topic that affects about 422 million people around the world: diabetes.
Tune into Wellness Unlocked, the series that delivers expert advice, practical tips, and inspiring stories to help you take control of your health and well-being. Your health matters. Don't miss Wellness Unlocked. Watch now on WESN and take the first step toward better health.
Maybe he landed here totally by coincidence. But if by chance he's admiring your fresh coat of Benjamin Moore soft sky blue, well, that's a pretty high compliment. Coming from an expert.
We are basically 1 month away from the day where the government of Trinidad and Tobago transitioned to its new look, as of course we got the election results, basically the new reality, April the 29th. So now joining me, of course, just about 1 month since his last appearance on Talking Point, we have former youth parliamentarian Camille Pascal here to, I guess, have a lot of various discussions of various situations that may or may not have revealed something about how our politicians are approaching the new political landscape here. It's still maybe way too early, but at the end of the day, it's never too soon to start analyzing the results. Camille, good morning. Welcome back to Talking Point.
Hi, Sean. Good morning. Good morning to your viewers and listeners. Good morning to Trinidad and Tobago. It's my pleasure to be here this morning.
So let's just start with the basics. It's been about a month. How do you view the government's approach so far to doing things? Because I'd say there have been some pros and cons, some things that I've liked, some things that I find questionable. Maybe it's too early to condemn the questionable things per se, but it's still things to highlight both the good and the bad to give context moving forward. What would you say about that?
Sure. I, like you, have been looking very closely and keenly at what this new administration have been doing in the last, I don't want to say month because they were sworn in, the Prime Minister was sworn in like about 4 days after, and then the government itself 5 days after, the ministers being. And then we had Parliament opening for a new term, for this entirely new 13th Republican Parliament just last Friday. So only then the MPs actually were able to take their oath and stuff. But as I said, I've been looking very keenly at what they have been doing, and they've been doing what I expected them to do, which is basically to review stuff. I mean, coming after a government who would have been there for the last just almost 10 years, you obviously now come and you'd be reviewing things that they were doing and obviously trying to cut back, as they have mentioned that they've been doing. So that's basically what they've done for the last month. But I think the real work not just starts where ministries are concerned, but the real work starts when Parliament reopens. So I'm looking forward to when that first sitting of Parliament is listed on the order paper.
I did say that as much as the opposition leader want to say there's no honeymoon period, it wasn't really up to the opposition. It's about the voting public. I think right now the government is still enjoying a honeymoon period. You know, no one is expecting them to solve all the problems tomorrow, right? They've been given some leeway to say, all right, we understand. You need to wait and see how things are going and try and figure it out. But at the same time, there have already been a couple of things that have come up that I am a little bit cautious about. There was how they treated the issue, whether it was a mistake, a slip of the tongue or not, with regards to property tax refunds, and in my opinion, and maybe I'm unique and alone in this, the pre-election agreements they had with the unions, because that situation is one where they didn't come in and look and examine what was going on and then make a decision. They had a pre-existing decision that they operated that guided them moving forward before they saw what was going on behind the scenes from the government's perspective. Although the flip side of that is they did say it up front in the election campaign. So technically speaking, while it might not actually be accurate to say, to some extent there's truth to say, well, the mandate includes agreement to go ahead with however they wanted to deal with WASA. I'm not saying that I agree with it, but in fact, they might not be able to do anything else than what they stated they were going to do with the WASA report and with regards to WASA, because they campaigned on it and they were voted in on that campaign. Would you agree?
Exactly. You are quite correct in saying that. It is really that they do have no other choice, basically, but to now move forward with their original plans, which were to scrap the transformation report, which I think we've been speaking about maybe since 2022, if I'm not mistaken, or probably the end of 2021. And so I think in that instance, the former government may have not acted fast enough in actually carrying out the changes that were needed to be made. Hence the reason a new administration has now come in and been able to basically push all those changes to the side and scrap it basically. And just to say that you are correct in that they have to move forward with the plans that they campaigned on, because the union probably gave them some amount of votes, and the union obviously would be looking forward to hearing and seeing what they intend to do with the things that they promised.
But the dichotomy, I find it's very apparent. You don't have to wait and see before you take these actions. And then the other thing is, I am concerned that the relationship with the union will eventually, the interests will diverge, as I've said multiple times on the show. The interests of the union are not going to be in line with the interests of the population, right? It's just naturally not going to always be the case. Sometimes it might, but not always. So at some point, the interests will diverge. Will the relationship be practical to be maintained by either side? I don't know, and I fear this might be a point of weakness in the administration, because Marvin Gonzalez said, and I didn't check the tape, so I don't know if you remember or not, but he did say that the WASA report, the UNC in opposition did not seemingly have such a strong reaction to it at the time when it was made public. It's only now in the election campaign cycle with the relationship with the PSA that they've taken such a strong stance on the matter.
I mean, I'd beg to differ simply because, as far as my recollection is, that at the time of the report being not just released, but all these things surrounding it being spoken about, the union at that time were very, very vociferous.
Well, the union was, but I was speaking about the UNC.
Or the UNC in particular.
When he was minister, Marvin Gonzalez claimed some of the UNC members, like the current minister of public utilities, Minister Padaras, did not have quite the same level of complaints over the WASA report or plans to restructure WASA that the administration has now. I'm not sure if you remember better than me. I don't want to necessarily say that MP Gonzalez is 100% right or wrong. I'm just presenting it so you could comment.
I think in that regard, I mean, they were speaking about it then, but obviously coming into an election cycle where you want to have everybody on board and you want to pull from all sides in what they call their coalition of interest, that's basically the interest of the union that this report be scrapped, because obviously it recommended that persons obviously be sent to in that entire restructuring process. And so I think what it really is, it's that the UNC basically was just doing what they had to do to get people on board at that time. Whether or not they actually, I mean, the Prime Minister tore it up 2 weeks ago, but whether or not they actually carry out that is kind of left to be seen. Carry out that cancellation of what the report really recommended. Left to be seen.
The funny thing is, there's a news report in one of the daily papers today where it still leaves certain workers in WASA kind of up in the air because they were mid-transition, and now to revert back, people are not entirely sure what's going on, who to report to, what, exactly who will fill the old positions, I guess, because they transitioned some of those positions out and so many people into new positions. But I want to move on to, first of all, one of the things that I've noticed with the administration, and I'm not necessarily going to fault them fully for this, but this is pertinent to the next point after. But right now, they're in a wait-and-see mode. And one of the first things that they did was they spoke about the precarious financial position that they found for, I believe it was last month and this month, or maybe this month and which is almost over, and June.
May and March in particular.
Right. So. Yeah. So they made that description. One of the messaging, and I can't fault the Prime Minister for saying it, because part of, you don't want people to lose confidence in society and economy, because that could be, it could cause a snowball effect in the negatives. Sure. So she said, don't worry, we will deal with it, we will find the money, we are under strain, we're reporting to you to tell you the strain, but we will figure it out. My concern is, it seems as though as new things pop up, they keep saying, we'll find the money, we'll find the money. And it goes back to a question that technically, as far as I remember, I asked potentially before Stuart Young asked it. So it's not based on the strength of his judgment. I asked this independently myself, as has others, I'm sure. How are they going to finance all the things that they are saying that they plan to do? I don't know. And is it that they're just trying to, from your point of view, are they just trying to not alarm people right now and they're not necessarily committing to anything yet? Or potentially are they kind of getting stuck on this potentially runaway train of don't worry, we'll figure it out, which is kind of what the PNM did, telling people not to worry and not really putting things in proper context with proper expectations, right, or managing the public's expectations. And if they continue not managing the public's expectations properly, at some point, the public might view that negatively, and there might be a backlash for it. What do you think about that?
That's it. You're absolutely correct in saying that, no, okay, people are going to view it like this. They're going to say, okay, it's a new government. They've only been there rather, just for a short while. Just for a month ago, the election was just a month ago. But at the end of the day, people are looking on and they are looking to see how quickly do you, as this new administration, move from your promises into them being policy to them being made into projects, and then see in the end of those projects. And people are looking, as you mentioned, from the union point of view, people are looking at that 10% increase that was basically promised on the campaign trail, and how are you all going to do that? And I think the only thing that we could really look forward to that will give us some kind of key and concrete idea as to what that may look like is the media review, which is carded for the month of June. So I think only when we get that, then we'll have an idea as to where they are looking at prioritizing. I know at the very first post-cabinet, or probably was the second one, the Prime Minister mentioned that they were looking at borrowing and drawing down from the HSF and stuff like that. But that was only to cap off the deficit within this fiscal year, and what would have been existing going into the election cycle. But what are you going to do in the new fiscal year, and how is your budget going to look? I think that will only be you will be able to see that when we hear what are their plans within the media review.
I'm just asking you to speculate here, but the implications of what you said, it makes me wonder right now, because they complained about drawing from the HSF and borrowing. I mean, technically everybody did, right? And there are reasonable complaints it's not sustainable. It seemed like the previous administration was doing it in a manner that they did not fully understand. I'm sure that they did. It's just that how they did it made it seem like they didn't understand that it wasn't sustainable. So now the incoming administration, off the bat, having to do it, okay, I get it. As you said, they found a situation that they have to deal with in the immediate term. But the next budget, is there a potential, you think, that they're going to contract expenditure? Because the flip side is, unless they magically find the $5 billion Dave Tanku claims to exist somewhere, the whole $5 billion, and that's not going to be enough for this year's deficit. If they want to keep the budget at the high 50s to 60 billion, we can't afford it, it seems.
Exactly. We definitely can't afford a budget in the vicinity of anywhere close to $60 billion. But the thing about it is that that's kind of why they are attempting to now cut back in areas. So they're looking at like things like government, advertising and stuff, and that's the areas that they've mentioned to cut back on. Some things I find to be a little trivial, like the printing of PBR passes. I mean, it may save us what I think the minister said last week, $1.2 million something annually.
Yeah,
in terms of the printing of it. Those things are, I mean, 1.2 million might be a lot to us, but in a government framework, that's sense.
I mean,
to be quite honest.
Would it be fair if they had like 50 instances like that? Then you might. I mean, but that's still only 50 million, right? But at least you could see, all right, we're trying hard to find everything, but one or two instances where it's $1 million, it kind of. We would rather you spend the energy somewhere else.
Exactly. So that's why I'm waiting to see over the next couple of weeks leading up to the media review, what do they say that they've cut, or what do they intend to cut? Because if they can show the population, okay, we've actually cut these things and this is what it has amounted to, this is what it could be summed up to, then we can say, okay, yes, they've attempted to actually cut. But if we have a 1.2 here, 1.2 there, that may not necessarily sum up to how much money we actually need to be saving for the long term.
And from your perspective, one of the things that I think is the largest things that we could get savings from would actually be the restructuring of various public service institutions.
Yes, you're correct.
Because of the nature of wage bills usually being 70% of an organization's costs, and I don't think anyone assumes that entities like WASA and ministries and other public service entities are not overstaffed. The port, I think to some extent, even Michael Anaset admitted basically the port is overstaffed in part because of politicians doing it, right? Not necessarily unions, but the unions don't want to then retrench anybody. It's like, well, you did this to us, but we don't want to participate in fixing it. And this is one of the low-hanging fruit areas, though it won't be easy to save money. Would you agree with that?
You're absolutely correct. I think if we look in the area of recurrent expenditure, that's one of the things that we definitely need to be looking at in terms of where we can cut back, because there are a lot of non-essentials within ministries that really and truly they are not needed. And so how we could now become more efficient and how we can now do more with less is obviously the challenge of any government that has to govern Trinidad and Tobago at this point in time. How they can do more with less, because we definitely need to cut back. There are things that we spend money on, there are programs that we spend money on that we literally, one, we don't see any return on it. And it's almost as if we are just spending money on these things without a return, even if it's in the short term or even if it's in the long term, there are no return on a lot of programs. So it is the challenge of the government now to find those programs, go through them like looking for a needle in a haystack, and attempt to now cut back on everything that doesn't or necessarily has a payout in the long run.
And I think also there's the phenomenon of public servants, not the ones at work, the ones that don't show up to work but still collect a check. And if people think that can't happen, apparently it happens in Washington. So who are we to say that it can't happen down here? But I want to.
It happens right here in Trinidad. I know that for.
Of course. I mean, everybody knows it. That's the thing. Everybody knows it. But like, society does not have any will to treat with it. I don't understand. Not just political. But I want to go towards the property tax situation, because my stance on it might not be universally accepted. But I think if you want to repeal property tax on principle that it's a burden to the population, I don't understand how, on principle, I understand there's practical concerns that makes it difficult. But on principle, similar to the SRC, it wasn't about the money, it was about the principle of the matter and how it looked. Not giving the refund if you're going to repeal property tax. I don't understand it, because it seems to me you're not making that decision based off of principle, you're making that decision based off of what you think is popular and what you think you could get away with, which is kind of what the PNM was doing at times, right, from my point of view. So I don't understand it. What do you make about not giving the refund? Regardless of who promised it or if nobody promised it, I thought once you said repeal property tax, you know, it's not like we had a year of paying it and everybody paid. I thought it was kind of implied, and I think to a lot of the population, it was implied we should be getting our money back. Would you agree or not, or disagree?
Well, the thing about it is that it is that the Prime Minister, she herself knows that the country needs this money. And the reason she has stated that if Tango could find the money to give it back, then he needs to tell the population where he's going to find the money. They know that the country needs this money at this point in time. So that's all I would have to say on this, is that they know that the country needs the money. Hence the reason they know it can't be. They are not in a position to refund the money. Well, I should say, not that it cannot.
Well, here's the thing then, because it's not as though everybody paid. It would be fair if everybody paid the tax and they kept the money. One payment from everybody, but that's not what happened. Some people paid, some people didn't. I think, Tunapuna paid a lot of money, those residents, and it's not as though we don't know for sure if it actually went to the Tunapuna Regional Corporation, right? It went to the Consolidated Fund to be used who knows where. So if the government needs the money, then is it the right move to repeal the tax?
Well, the thing is, this government came in on a mantra of obviously no new tax, and asked the tax not as big as back in 2010, but obviously they campaigned on removing property tax, and they've always stated that they don't believe that the burden should be passed on to the citizens, and the citizens shouldn't have to pay any new taxes and that kind of thing. So I think in the short term, they would be able to achieve what they want to in terms of repealing the Property Tax Act, the act that governs the collection of that particular tax. But I think overall they know that our revenue streams are not what they used to be, and they aren't as strong as they used to be, and it's that we need new revenue streams, and we need whatever existing streams we have to not just be further added, but to be strengthened, really.
But let me just go further with this topic, because I said it before, right? It seems as though for a lot of things, we'll find the money. We'll find the money. Don't worry. We'll figure it out. We'll find the money, right? And a lot of what they're looking to find the money for are recurring expenditures, right? Correct. They have to find the money to balance the budget. They have to find the money to move forward. This is a one-time payment. And as much as it is $135 million, $135.6 million. $0.6
million, correct.
Right? I'm like, this is a one-time payment. And I'm not too sure if I like the implication that they're trying to have their cake and eat it too. On principle, we're going to repeal the tax because it's a burden for the population. But it's not convenient for us to refund those that actually took on that burden in the last year, right? And for a one-time payment, we can't find the money. But we could find the money in other areas. And that's, to me, like, I find it's maybe not as blatant as the SRC acceptance, but it is along that same line where I don't like how this looks. And some of the population is fine with it, and some of the population is not fine with it. And to have such a contentious situation in your first month, I find it's, on one hand, interesting, but on another hand, I do wonder, you know, would it have been better if it's political, if they are only thinking political, to give the refund and to smooth things over? Maybe I'm wrong.
I think the population can basically definitely not take comfort, but they can actually see for themselves that they are not going to get this refund, simply because when the Prime Minister was asked about it last week, her response was basically that she told you all not to pay the tax.
Yeah.
And you all still went ahead and paid it, even though it was the law, which I find to be crazy coming from a Prime Minister, and nobody really zeroed in on it.
To be fair, from my understanding, property tax was so incomplete in its implementation, there was no real way for the government to enforce the requirement to pay it at the time, because the tribunal wasn't set up, amongst other things. So,
yes, that's correct.
So it's this weird no man's land where I can't say Kamala Pasabi says it was wrong to say what she did, but to some extent you're not wrong with your criticism either. It was just such a weird situation that of where we were left in this halfway mode that, yeah, it is what it is.
Yeah, as I said, I kind of found it cause, but you are correct. The tribunal, which would have looked at things like reviewing, like let's just say someone had an issue and they found that the amount that their property was valued at was probably too little or too much, or they were probably told to pay $2,000 and they really should have been paying $800. That tribunal to review cases like that was not set up. And I think she was correct in the sense that obviously that tribunal should have kind of been set up so that people would have had a chance to review it. But at the same time, I still don't see the need for a Prime Minister to say she told you all not to pay it and you all paid it.
Yeah.
It was the law.
I think somebody mentioned the fact that it's, forgive the expression, it sounded like something Keith Rowley would say. And it's one, and this is where I could transition in our last 5 to 10 minutes. I find that in that instance, I agree with the caller, but also with some of the current opposition members, right, whether elected or in party positions, it seems like they're trying to be Keith Rowley. And as much as some people would view how he spoke and how his messaging style as a negative, I would argue, look, only Keith Rowley could be Keith Rowley. And to some extent, it worked for him. And he was able to tap dance between making statements like that and then going back to be respectful and prime ministerial. And he was able to kind of do it successfully, more so than others. And I think it's a mistake when other people kind of try to copy him in that manner, right? And so I agree with you. I don't think the Prime Minister should have said what she said, but that is what it is. For the PNM, I find that too many of them, they're acting in this kind of defiant way where it doesn't seem as though they kind of realize, in terms of total votes, this is a worse defeat than 2010, right? You have a seat more than 2010, but you have like 50 to 60,000 votes less than 2010. And the UNC didn't even necessarily compete head-to-head, or the coalition didn't even compete head-to-head in Tobago. You lost all them Tobago votes on your own, right? So, well, to the TPP, to be fair. But am I correct? How have you seen the opposition's messaging? Because outside the opposition leader, who I think has been doing the right thing with regards to our messaging and trying to refocus the party to rebuild and to properly, like, figure out what happened and try to approach it with some amount of humility moving forward. But I find like a lot of the members of the PNM, they just want to continue where they left off after the election. And my issue is, well, you lost doing that. So I don't understand. Do you think that the PNM members are potentially being still sounding like they're out of touch, still sounding like they're arrogant and defiant? and in denial, in a sense, of the reality of where they find themselves?
To an extent, yes. But I really feel as though it obviously has to do with leadership, but I expect that to now come full circle once the parliamentary term, well, obviously it started last Friday, but once parliament sittings actually begin, I think only then we'll be able to properly judge the way in which they work as a team, because that's where you will see them all together as one. The way in which they support each other, the way in which they debate and respond to the opposition. As of right now, I think it's kind of like, okay, kind of tit for tat. The new government ministers say, well, this is what's been done for the last 9 years. One of the former ministers comes out and responds. I think that's really where they are right now, but we really haven't been able to fully judge their cohesion as a team. What I would say is that if I were them, in the short term, I would, like the Democrats were advised to do last year, play dead and allow the government to do their thing. And when the time is right, then you all come out and speak and address matters.
Yeah, because when you've lost to the extent that the Democrats lost and the PNM lost, it's not like you have a platform to speak from and a mandate to be aggressive, right? And I think the opposition leader, I'm inferring from her public statements, seemingly understands that, but I do wonder if, you know, for different reasons, I do think it's for different reasons, former ministers of the past administration, they don't fully understand that. And some of them might be trying to jockey for position in the new PNM in order to keep their political career, right? Part of it could be survival mode. This new PNM administration, the last time they lost anything close to this bad, I think there was a clear informal consensus. Dr. Hitrauli is the leader. And everybody accepted that, and we move forward. And it's not quite as clear with Penelope Beckles, because she wasn't the outsider who disagreed. So now that they lost, they have that outsider, right? She was technically not so much an insider, but still part of cabinet, right? So they don't have that faction, that dissident faction that is clearly the alternative to what lost the election. So what we have is basically a faction of the holdovers from the election defeat. So the mandates on the opposition side is not quite the same. How important then would that make this upcoming internal election going forward? Because I fear if they firmly boil here, people say the PNM has been in power for most of the history of TNT, but this, if they mismanage this, it could be the next step on the winds of change, where all of a sudden the next 60 years might not be mostly PNM, it might be mostly UNC or somebody else.
No, you're absolutely correct. If they fumble now, they will not hold or will not be seen as that party that they describe themselves to be, which is an institution, a party that stands on principles, a party that has transition moving into their 70th year come January next year. They probably may not be seen as that if they drop the ball in terms of how they handle these internal elections coming up. So they themselves need to be very, very cautious about how they portray themselves in the public eye, because people obviously are looking on. You are the opposition party, the main opposition party now. And any opposition party, their main thing is waiting or preparing themselves, always being ready to be made government. Because at the end of the day, you don't really know what happens within a government. And so at any point in time, a government could be new. It happens around the world. A government could last a year, could last months, and then election is called just like that. So you as an opposition party need to be always prepared for whenever the opportunity comes for you to become the next government. You don't enter into politics to be in opposition, you know.
Yeah.
You enter into politics because you feel that your team, or you as an individual, or your party has something that they can contribute to the people of the particular country. And so when you are entering, you're entering because you want to be in government.
Well, just want to close. I don't know to what extent you've observed the sentiment post-election over the last 29 to 30 days. Of course, there are a lot of people who they think, you know, everything is lighter now that they have a new government, a new administration. Of course, they haven't necessarily proven themselves in the long term yet. But they have done some interesting moves with some of the cabinet ministers being essentially political outsiders. So it gives the whole political landscape a facelift, not just the UNC party in and of itself. But there are still diehard PNM supporters that they're almost like they don't want to believe any of the negativity post-election, which I don't understand. Meanwhile, there are UNC supporters that they just can't accept any criticisms of the new administration because they could do no wrong, apparently. Now that they've won the election, they are sacrosanct, they could do no wrong. And it makes me feel those two absolute positions, we are no closer to figuring out how to heal divisions on the political spectrum, right? And rather, it seems as though we're cementing this is one side, that is the other side, and to some extent, we're not going to necessarily be able to move forward as a whole country anytime soon. What do you make about that? Have you seen something similar?
Well, the thing about it is that the government, they are in their honeymoon period, so people would, you know, be seeing them as they can't do anything wrong. But I think once they get down to work, obviously, people do make mistakes, like anybody else, like PNM did, like previous UNC administrations did, and there will be people who may or may not mess up along the way. And I think when the time comes for that that criticism to take place, there will be it's Trinidad and Tobago. People will criticize. Let's be real about that. So I expect that if a mistake is made, people are going to criticize. Even if the previous administration made the same mistake, that same administration that sat there before, they are going to criticize as well. So the thing about it is that that's just the nature of how our political to-ins and throw-ins go here in Trinidad and Tobago. That's literally how it is. But I think on the side of us seeing some sort of collaboration and unity going forward, I think we might just be in for that. It really depends on how things play off in this new parliamentary term.
Right.
And the opposition leader has obviously said and signaled that they don't intend to be obstructionists, and they intend to support law once it's deemed to be benefiting Trinidad and Tobago, and once they obviously can put forward amendments to whatever particular law, whatever particular policies are fleshed out by the government. I
mean, I hope that plays out, but I don't have much realistic expectations. Yeah, I hope, but the hope is I don't have much hope. You're right. Okay, we had to take a break. When we come back, we'll open phone lines. We'll be rejoined by Ashraf Ali. Hopefully, Camille, you could stay as well?
Yeah, I'll be here for some time.
Right, so we'll have Camille also for the phone line. So you could call and ask either of my contributors on Talking Point, their point of views on whatever questions you have, or maybe clarifications. Maybe you don't like the opinions that we gave during the show so far. You could go question, you could complain about that, you know. There's not just politicians that get criticized. We get criticized too, but that's fine. That's part of the job, to have the discussion after this. Stay tuned.
Yeah, I know what to ask you. How long?
Her voice has mesmerized us for years.
And now, in a rare treat for music fans,
Shakuntala and Friends in concert, featuring Shakuntala Jangbahadur. Singing sensation Deval Jeklal, brilliant musician Dr. Shivanan Maharaj, master flautist and saxophonist Narendra Maharaj, with music from Shiv Sangeet Orchestra, Shakuntala and Friends in concert.
Shakuntala.
The Little Store offers you a great shopping experience in cool comfort with knowledgeable, helpful staff. Our large aisles and well-organized shelves are filled with quality puja materials, incense sticks, tasty mithai, and homemade yogurt. Come to us for all your Indian groceries and spices, SAS paper sahari leaves, household items, sewing supplies, religious books, and lots more. You can depend on the Little Store, your store. It's an honor to serve you.
When it comes to Pira and Laddu, I just use Chatak's Laddu and Pira Mithai Mix. It's a combination of traditional ingredients in one pack. I don't spend all that time preparing different ingredients like Ma. 3/4 of the work is done. So now I can make fresh, delicious pira and laddu in about 15 minutes with the convenience of Chattak's laddu and pira mithai mix. Now Ma's Kitchen is a Chatta kitchen. Now available Gulab Jamun instant mithai mix.
My parents' generation grew up with Royal Castle. From the first restaurant in 1968, when that distinctive, tempting aroma hit the air. Like never before, fried chicken with a special blend of local seasonings and a one-of-a-kind flavor down to the bone. Today, Royal Castle still have that same delicious taste, and I love it too. And the kids, they have more to enjoy. For me, the castle is more than just nice food. It's we own, part of me and you, and is the real flavor of TNT.
Low energy? Heart concerns? Migraines slowing you down? It's time to take control of your health. Join Wellness Unlocked, the series that brings expert advice and real solutions for a healthier you. In our latest episode, learn how Jameson CoQ10 can help support heart health, boost energy, and even reduce migraines. Get the science, the stories, and the steps to power up your health with CoQ10. Don't miss Wellness Unlocked. Watch now on WESN and start your wellness journey today.
And we're back here on Talking Point on WSND Connect Cattle Show. Michael Small, joined by Camileo Pascal and Ashraf Ali. And now is the time we open the phone lines. You could call in, have your say. Last show of the week. So if you have anything you want to get off your chest, you need to call in now or forever hold your peace, at least until next week.
Mr. Pascal, good morning, sir.
Good morning. Sorry, I didn't
it's nice.
realize that.
It's nice to see. It's nice to see you.
Yes.
Or to be on the same platform with you. All right.
Yes.
You know, we're on the same locations at some point.
Yes, we share history.
We share history.
I mean, you all were supposed to share locations on election night as well. You know, I'm just saying.
I was listening to some of your conversations, and what is very interesting is that I think that there are certain decisions, and one that came up that is really interesting, and I would like this new administration to address, is that when we are developing laws and we put in laws in place, we understand what it means to operationalize those laws at the same time. Because one of the biggest things that what's the biggest, in my opinion, that is causing a lot of problem right now is the marijuana legislation that is there. Up to this time, no one has been charged for the offense of possession, smoking marijuana in public. So you have a legislation that, and I would like to find out if there's any data at this point in time, or they could get any data at this point in time that would indicate that how prevalent it is now with the abuse of marijuana and the misuse of marijuana by a vast cross-section of Trinidad and Tobago, with the introduction of the decriminalization of marijuana and not having proper enforcement for the parts that are offenses.
Carol?
No, he's absolutely correct in terms of operationalizing stuff. Because, okay, so you have laws they go to Parliament as a bill, they are debated, passed, go to the Senate, assented to by the President, proclaimed, and whatever is the case. But ask the politicians how much input has a police officer had in the framing of that legislation. Ask a politician how much input, and I'm not speaking about people wearing khaki, I'm speaking about the constable who has to go out there, the corporal, the sergeant, the inspector who may have to sign off on whatever, how much input that particular person had in the shaping and the framing of the laws. And so he's correct in that sense. We have to craft our laws with people in mind. You're not governing animals, you're governing people. And people would have a reaction to the law. So what if they do this in this instance? How do we then react? You know, that's so I agree with him.
Okay, so we have a caller from St. James. Good morning, caller. You on there?
Hello?
Morning, caller. You on there? Go ahead.
Yes, good morning to you three.
Morning.
Morning.
This is three questions to the ex-officer there. Number one, in the police agreement with the relevant, I should say, union, is there a clause in the agreement stating whether the sick leave is eligible or entitled? Because eligible, people interpret that to mean entitled, and sort of mix up the two phrases. The second thing is that when the officer goes on leave, sick leave that is when on his return, is he required to submit a certificate of fitness to return? And you know what happens thereafter. The third question is on the news. It is said that one of the cartridges, whatever it is, has the TTPS marking on it. Now I recall that some audit was supposed to have taken place some time ago in Kumuto, wherever, to determine whether there are any missing ammunition and so. But I've heard nothing of that from them. So I was wondering whether that is like all other audits, is just pushed under the carpet. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. Well,
just like any the industrial relations, remember we still fall under the public service at the same time, and our agreement when it comes to the organization is that we are entitled to 14-day sick leave.
Right.
Right.
Not eligible.
Not eligible. We are entitled to it.
Right.
Right. It's part of our agreement, and it's similar to all public service.
Right.
Public servants. Right. We know that the rule of law and the procedural arrangement is that if you extend 1 day sick leave does not require a medical certification. 2 days sick leave, it does not require medical certification. Once you go beyond 2 days sick leave, you need a doctor's certification indicating the nature of your sick leave for you to go. If an officer comes off of extended sick leave, an extended sick leave is beyond the 14 days that you're required, and it means that the person must attend to go to DMO and back to the police doctor to get authorization to be physical, to be examined, that you are fit to continue performing duties. It's the same thing across all public service, arrangements. It is not unique to the police service.
So to some extent, at least there's no facility to cordon off the police and treat it separately.
No.
It has to be treated like, if you want to change it, you have to change everybody. Or new legislation.
Or new legislation to change the manner in which police officers use sick leave. Right? Remember, police officers don't have things like casual leave and all those separate things.
Camilla, I want to bring you in here with just the question of, because Ashraf is saying this is a public service thing, and I keep saying a lot of times some of the HR issues with the police is mirrored in the rest of the public service. is, and we kind of touched on it earlier, is this one of those things where if we really want to see it improve, like the population might need to kind of buck up and say, look, let's fix it and close the loopholes and understand, yes, not let people take advantage of it, but it has to be done across the board. Because to some extent, it is kind of unfair if we say, well, no, what's good for the police is that we don't have to worry about everybody else. It should be fixed across the board, right? And part of that is, well, we kind of paying people money. So what do you say to that quick before the call on the public needing to have to want and accept or be willing to accept change across the board? Otherwise, we'll have to lament in this.
Yeah, correct. It's that the entire public service has to be changed, especially where the provision of leave is concerned.
All right. I appreciate the short answer because we do have a caller from Faizabad waiting. Good morning, caller. You're on the air.
Good morning, Sean. Good morning, gentlemen. Good
morning.
Sir. Officer, I remember having a conversation with the now Minister of Homeland Security a couple of years ago with respect to the implementation of the law for charging people who are using the marijuana in public. And his answer to me, the reason for not having it is that they didn't have the requisite book, the receipt book, or the charge book as they would want to call it. And so I remember having that conversation. Another thing, I think we need to revisit the legislation because I've been in contact with some medical people because I show an interest into that, and they are now saying they are now seeing an uptick with people coming into the facility with you know, the effects, the overuse of the substance. You know, it's having a devastating effect, especially on the youth. So I think we need to revisit that. With respect to sick leave of the policemen, is it an entitlement? Is it a benefit? I think we seem to be confusing the both of them. Yes? So, you know, HR should be able to clear up that because there's a difference between a benefit and an entitlement. An entitlement would simply mean that you could take it even though you're not sick.
So let me just add to you, you're entitled to it because if it was a benefit, you would have benefited from it. Because if an officer does not take his 14 days sick leave, he has nothing to get fit.
Okay, and so then what happens when he go over 14 days?
Well, that is an administrative procedure now where you have to go through
exactly
administrative procedures. So it has to go both ways. So the discussion is whether or not it's an entitlement.
Yeah, so I think entitlement stops somewhere and benefit kicks in. I think they work in harmony with each other, you know, officers.
And I agree, and I think in order for us to address it holistically, if an individual in the public service, because there are some persons in public service that if they do not utilize their sick leave benefits, they are paid for it at the end of the year.
Right.
That's right. That's right.
However, it does not work like that in the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service.
Yes.
You automatically loses. You lost it. So, as a result of that, I mean, I think that if you want to motivate an officer or encourage officers not to abuse such an entitlement, they should be benefiting from it.
Correct.
At the end of the year.
Okay.
Because I know WASA has such a plan in place that they use to work with. Another thing, sir, I would like to find out if it is with the Sanya Brown legislation, would applicants have to reapply or application that is inside will be considered? Thank you very much, my
This is FULs for firearms?
Yes, sir.
I think
I don't think you would have to reapply.
But to be on the safe side, I'm just saying to be on the side of caution, it is always important to inquire as to the status of your file. That is the safest part to play with.
But yeah, that law should not cause anyone to have to reapply for an
No,
FUL.
it should not reapply. It's a different.
Right? Unless, for whatever reason, there's a specific technical reason that would require it for a specific, like in the law, which I can't really anticipate that happening. Camille, I've spoken to Ashraf about the marijuana usage, and I know he started off on it. I just wanted to go there because the caller said medical practitioners basically are seeing it being abused. I think we're in a situation where we kind of did a compromised situation that we're not really benefiting either from the decriminalization or what parts are still criminal, because the gangs are still making a lot of money apparently from marijuana. They're bringing it in by the truckload, right? We catch it by the truckload, and that's the stuff that we catch. So, do you think that that's correct? Because we're seeing the negatives of decriminalization, the negatives of not decriminalization in the current situation that we find ourselves in. We don't see the positives of either.
But the thing about it is that I've only heard that doctors and medical personnel have been seeing an uptick in persons who are doing like substance abuse and stuff, but I haven't seen any like hardcore data to say there is in fact an uptick. But I think when you think about the fact that yes, people can have the plants at home and how many plants per person, per adult, and whatever, and whether it's male or female plants or whatever is the case, I think on that side it's kind of about the grade. Remember, the grade that you're getting that you plant at home will be different from what is manufactured and produced under different types of lighting and that kind of stuff. Because if you ask people who do like research on marijuana, they'll tell you under certain lighting, under certain conditions, the product in the plant, the CBP or whatever it is, the concentration will be different to what you get when you just plant at home and you just water.
But Kemal,
so I think that's why we're still seeing persons that illegal trade still taking place.
I just want to ask Kemal, but realistically, have you experienced or walking on the streets of Trinidad and Tobago, physically observed,
smelled,
I've physically seen, I've physically seen the number of persons, the increase in the number of persons at varying ages, right? Just in the public, smoking marijuana, rolling marijuana, and have it in the possession is something different with respect to the quantity. So you know decriminalized, but the actual using of marijuana, you cannot go anywhere, and I can realistically, you cannot really go anywhere in Trinidad and Tobago and do not observe any public space the number of persons smoking marijuana. You have limitations with the use of cigarettes, but not the use of marijuana. Strange enough.
Well, and that leaves me, Camille. Okay, I do have a question to follow up on that, but we have a call on WhatsApp. We'll take the call. Good morning, caller. You on here?
Right, Diego Martin inside. Good morning, Sean. And to the two co-hosts there, first time I'm using your WhatsApp number. Are you hearing me?
Yes, we're hearing you loud and clear, Diego Martin.
All right. 6 months, the Prime Minister said we have to mitigate against crime. The police service commissions have failed us with respect to selection of the leadership of the country. Likewise, the police service themselves have mucked up, quote unquote, their promotion processes. It has gone to court and the court has ruled on it. As a citizen, 6 months is not a great challenge. It can be accomplished if we fix one of the most critical organizations for fighting crime, and that's the TTPS. I have a vested interest. I have seen the performance and the demeanors of senior officers on programs like yours and other media houses. And I have identified some of the officers who I believe could fit into the leadership of the executive. And I want to identify one of them who has been on the Beyond the Tape on Wednesday. That is not Roger Alexander. I'm not going to call the sergeant name, but he's a very highly educated person. And I believe he's been victimized. I will go use a harsh term, because he was a cricketer, he was a leader, he was a captain of the West Indies cricket team. He has shown the leadership qualities for teamwork. He changed from being a cricketer and he went into the police service, and he's been, quote unquote, vindictive against him in his promotional aspirations. He applied for the DCP position, and the Police Service Commission did not want to take his transcript for his master's in law with distinction. What that tells you, meritocracy is not one of the characteristics the TTP is using. So I'm calling, and I'm hoping by using this means, the people in authority could understand there's a lot of talent in the TTPS that for some reason or the other, the culture of the country, the culture of the police have not given them an opportunity to help fix. And I'm saying this acting sergeant needs to be given a fair, no discrimination against them. I'll go and have a nice morning.
Thank you, caller. Well, I do recall that then Prime Minister Young did mention, when he said they wanted to change the process to select a commissioner, that they needed to change legislation if they wanted to go below the ranks. So that was, to me, an indication that the veneer of meritocracy was completely disproven by that point. I do support that. It was seniority based. That's what it seems like. And there are too many junior officers that look a lot better, in my opinion, than the officers that end up in the executive. Relatively junior officers. We have a caller on WhatsApp, so we'll have to take the call. Good morning, caller. You on here?
Yeah, morning, Sean.
Morning.
Ms. Kamal and your inspector. Wonderful program as usual. Sean, you know why it hurts me sometimes to sit down on day after day after day. People just come bashing the police. And I know that the ASP is a gentleman in his own right, but you know, if you would say things that are factual, I'd have a problem with it. But to come and talk about X person was a cricketer and you didn't get promoted, I would have applied for the position of ASP back then too. You have many persons who are qualified. Look like the guy who is the lawyer. I think he's just a sergeant and he's a brilliant officer. So I just think that the callers must do the research and come with facts. The ASP is on target. I worked in the police pay office for many years, and the whole idea about sick leave and extended sick leave is on target. But I must say that I'm hearing the Minister of Homeland Security talking about there's a problem with police, there's a problem with teachers, there's a problem with prison officers.
Yeah.
That's the same system that they continue to abuse. Thank you very much for the opportunity. You'll have a nice day.
Thank you, caller. I'll just say this, in defense of the previous caller, when you look at the executive, like the past substantive commissioner, and you compare it to the performance of some of the other officers in lower ranks, the public has left kind of confused. How do we go from that and we promote and we get that? That's why I could give the previous caller pass. We have San Fernando. This should be the last call for the morning because we have a few things to wrap up. Good morning, caller from San Fernando.
Good morning, Sean. Good morning, Mr. Pascal, and good morning, Mr. Ali.
Morning, sir.
Morning.
I want to jump right into Mr. Ali's boat. When he asked Kemuel the question, when he walking on the streets, if he smells marijuana, there is, and I must say this to you, Kemuel, you talk about data, not enough data. There is enough data. If you ask people across Trinidad and Tobago, you walk the street, you're smelling marijuana, you're seeing people smoking marijuana, bold face in the road. Especially in the South man here. You see it all the time. The amount of people I know whose sons and the daughters smoking marijuana in South here, it is ridiculous. the amount right now I have some men working on a property there, and I had to boof two of the young men working there for that same reason, that marijuana reason. I had to boof them because I'm not tolerating that on any one of my projects. It is time that I hope that Mrs. Prasad Bisesa instruct Mr. Jeremy, just like how she instructed him to repeal the property tax, to repeal this marijuana legislation. Come with something different. This is not working for the young people of Trinidad and Tobago. It is not working for them. One other thing I want to talk about quickly is you had a caller, I think it's yesterday, Sean, or the day before, was talking about the flooding.
Right.
And where people building house and talking about the floodplains in Central and in Barako and those places. I want to say something to that caller. People living there long time, and it has been the neglect of the state that has not found alternatives for this situation for so long. The state has not put any serious effort. We have the same water courses that we have at the same sizes since independence, and there is no serious attempt to try and deal with the situation because they can't come up with stuff. Let me say this, John. Last year I had a project going on, and I had to be in Barako for about 2 months. I used to have to, and during the rainy season. And I understood, you hear people saying about flooding in Barako and Central and whatever. And I understood because of my project, and I was back and forth there, the fear. Because I felt it myself, because once the rain started to fall, you see the rain clouds quite down there, you see that falling in St. Mary's or somewhere down Moruga. That same water, it had to be raining in Barako, and that same water coming down from there to Barako, to flood Barako. So, and imagine if it had rained, because what happens is how the water runs. Some of the water from Moruga, from the water from St. Mary's, comes down through Barako, through Pina, before it goes to the ocean. And it is time that we come up with solutions to try and mitigate this flooding issue. This is the 21st century that we're in.
Yeah.
And Trinidad and Tobago needs to deal with this. That is one thing I hope Ms. Prasad Bisesa appoint a minister of flood mitigation or something to deal with this situation. And I want to tell that caller, talking about people know the flood coming and put this stuff on bricks and that kind of thing. That's ridiculousness, man. Not in this day and age. It's time that we deal with this situation of flooding in Trinidad and Tobago.
Thank you.
Have a good weekend, gentlemen.
Same to you.
Same to you, same to you. Yeah, I mean, at some point when the water is chest high, you don't have enough bricks, you don't have enough ceiling clearance to put your fridge on bricks. But I don't want to get that. Kemel has to run. So Kemel, there was one thing I wanted to ask you, and Mr. Sanfano just compounded my want to ask the question, because he thinks it needs to be repealed. The status quo is bad, right? And I think he's already heard me talk about it. My thought is either make it illegal again or fully decriminalize it so that you could regulate it, like alcohol and like cigarettes. Because the no man's land that it's in now, people are kind of getting away breaking the law, and I think it's potentially contributing to more law breaking, as well as the fact that since it's not regulated in any significant way, you have potentially minors abusing it or young people abusing it in ways that, yes, you could do similar things with alcohol, but there are still at least some safeguards. Maybe I'm wrong. And it seems like we have less safeguards for marijuana than we do for alcohol under the status quo. So what would you think? I think we should try decriminalizing it and regulating it. But which one would you pick between that or just making it illegal again, or what other third alternative?
Well, if I'm not mistaken, I remember when it was debated in Parliament back then, under then AG Al-Rawi, it was said that they would have had some kind of review in, if it's not a couple of months or probably like a year from when it was passed, to see the impact. And I don't think that we've had that study commission or whatever is the case to actually understand what impact that has had, the use rather, of more persons using it now has had on not just older persons, but especially the youth. And I think it's important that, as the caller mentioned, if possibly the Prime Minister could look at that, that would kind of help so that we know where we go for. Because you see, too often we make decisions without any kind of data and without doing the proper background research. But it'll be important that we not just, get rid of the entire thing, but just kind of review it and see how best we can strengthen it, similar to the demerit point system.
I was not going to say that one too. You understand? And Kamala's right in the context we're talking about. You make it, you decriminalize it, at a certain amount, it is supposed to be an offense, a ticketable offense as the case may be. But it's a ticketable offense, but there is no way for us to treat with a ticketable offense because under the laws of Trinidad and Tobago, it's a summary offense. There's a procedure to follow for a summary offense. It cannot issue a ticket for it because, like I said, there's no ticket book. The court doesn't even know how to address issuing of it. And one of the issues that from the context of operationalization, in Trinidad and Tobago, there is no legal requirement in law that says that Sean Michael Small or Mr. Ashraf Ali must have a form of identification on him to walk the streets of Trinidad and Tobago. It is not part of our law. So if I stop Sean Michael Small, who am I going to issue a ticket to? Under the Motor Vehicle Road and Traffic Act, it's different. It gives specific requirements, driver's license. And
you have to check for that to drive a car.
Yes, but walking the streets and smoking a marijuana, who am I going to issue a ticket to? Yeah. And then there is also the other aspect of it, of the evidential value if somebody should contest. What were you smoking? You must have some evidential value to present. And it would mean what? You must have the item that you are claiming or alleging that I was smoking. So there's a lot of operationalization that was not considered.
And that's the thing. I just to kind of summarize, folks, the way how the laws are structured makes it technically difficult, right? And there's potential ways to restructure the laws to make these things, because to the public, when they see about what goes on in these states and stuff, this should seem very straightforward. Why is it so hard? It's because the laws were not structured in a way to make it practical, and they need to be restructured. But I guess it goes back to Kemal's point, and Kemal has had to leave us, so we thank him for being on Talking Point, folks, and hopefully you'll see him again in the near future. But Kemal had an important point where, are the people on the ground consulted when doing these things? Because they are the ones that have to do the work. And that more recent point that he made about the PNM administration not doing a review, and granted a 6-month review might have been too soon, but the point is how many things were kind of done in an incomplete manner. And when you're trying to deal with criminal activity and the legislation is not solid, you leave too much on the table that up for grabs that could come back to haunt you. One of the last things I want to get to, because one of the callers, a few callers ago, mentioned the bullet cartridge situation with police and I'll lump in Defense Force markings. So I think it's a case where they're probably investigating it. We just don't know what it is because that is the usual modus operandi, not to reveal investigative details.
And we just come back to the same full cycle to the conversation that we have
with the body cameras,
with the level of transparency in an investigation. Now, yes, I agree. The nature of the investigation will determine what you can what can share and what you cannot share, right? But when you leave it open up for speculation, we have a lot of things to deal with. I just want to mention when your caller talk about the flooding area.
Yes, sure.
Because of where I sit in where my area is disaster management.
Yeah.
The Carney floodplains, it was there for that purpose. When the swamp and with high tide and rainfall, water is supposed to expand into the floodplains.
Yeah.
That is what the floodplains are there for, because swamp and marshlands for there. So when the tide low, when the tide falls now, the water will eventually run out. We're in a situation where majority of our floodplains, when you go down the highway, watch where some of the floodplains are. They are being taken for commercial as well as residential use. They have been built up because it is in a floodplain, so persons are doing filling.
Where the water should have run through and be contained.
So when you stop water from dispersing, it is now being corralled in a particular manner, and the volume that is coming to the Carney, the mouth of the Carney River, in that river going to see,
it's not enough.
It's not enough.
So the only thing is, when you look at the West, how much reclaimed land, which is basically you're building up on the coast and you're potentially kind of trapping water from running into the sea. You're building up on the mountains across the northern range, so you're reducing the amount of vegetation to help retain the water and not have landslides. And then you go now into central Trinidad and you're building on floodplains. And at least in two of those things, because building too much on the mountain, that's its own problem. I don't think drainage is going to necessarily help with that. Maybe some sort of reservoirs, specifically in strategic locations, can help with that. But with regards to reclaiming land and blocking drainage and taking over floodplains, you could artificially try to then have drainage measures, and you don't have those corresponding drainage projects with the development projects, and this should be part of development too. And have large canals, and I've said this time and time again. There was one year where I kid you not, in the papers, one part of the country is dealing with the losses due to flooding, while another part of the country is saying we haven't had water for weeks.
The irony
only in Trinidad is that possible, and you would think we have an excess of water at times in one area and a shortage of water in the other. What if we actually utilize the flood waters, treat it, store it into new reservoirs? I don't know, it's not that simple, folks. It's just a theory, right? Yeah. But still, we're not even hearing talk about the theory. And at the end of the day, we're not seeing any, I think what Mr. San Fernando alluded to, we're not actually seeing anything being done.
So
right? Besides cleaning the pre-existing stuff, and even then, of questionable. Okay. I'm hearing from Master Control. We have one more. I might have to ask you to cut it short because we're out of time. But we have one more comment coming in. A caller. Good morning.
Hello. Good morning to you, Mr. Paul.
Morning.
Good morning to you, Senior.
Morning, sir.
It is really. I must say, this has been a most refreshing morning in terms of hearing all the different opinions. I want to ask Senior a point. I mean, you have lived in the police service for a large portion of your life. And do you feel the police service is currently structured to meet the needs and demands of an evolving society like Trinidad?
All right.
I want to be brutally honest with that caller. I'll be brutally honest.
I have your answer screaming in my head.
Yes, I will be brutally honest. No, it is not. We are still operating in the context of policing, and I've been saying it over and over. We are doing not policing for the people, but policing people. When you do... Sure, go ahead.
And one other point I want to make. Is it that instead of having one commissioner of police, we perhaps need to disaggregate Trinidad and Tobago into 4 areas and have a commissioner of police for North, a commissioner of police for South, a commissioner of police for East, a commissioner of police for West? I don't know, but I merely know that what we have been doing has not worked for us, and that is why I am posing this question this morning.
I mean,
I would say Tobago instead of West.
No, but I think I think the caller is looking at something from a different perspective. It has some value in the conversation. There is the internal structure within the organization where you have a regional assistant commissioner of police.
Right.
But our assistant commissioner of police does not have that authority vested in he or she as that of a commissioner of police. So I think it's something that there could be considered, it means that we may have the executive of the organization as well as the Police Service Commission, and to restructure the organization to have a better control, because it's, the fact of the matter is different areas in small Trinidad and Tobago, there's need to have different the way that we police those areas and a level of responsibility for those areas given the context. Whether it would work in the context of what we're looking at, I cannot say, because I don't know whether or not any feasibility study would have been done or considered with the structure. But to compound my first statement, I believe that we are still operating, not understanding that we are no longer, we are going into 21st century and beyond. And the way that we police and the way that we have said that we are no longer the Trinidad and Tobago police force, but we're still operating like if we are a force.
Yeah.
Changing the word to service. Service means a different connotation. It means that we are here to serve the public. Are we really serving the public? Are we providing service both internal, even our internal, in the police service, the internal public, right, are lacking service internally, because you hear about a lot of issues internally, administratively, when it comes to promotion, when it comes to the officers who claiming that they have not been able to get their pension, who are retired officers. There's a lot of internal arrangements that even service is lacking. If service is lacking within an organization, servicing their own people, how you expect those persons who are disgruntled in one aspect of it, who are demoralized, and have to give proper service to the general public, where we're saying that we are here to serve, protect and serve with pride?
To the caller's point, the idea of having more authority in regional commanders, I don't necessarily think it's a good or bad one. I think it really just depends on implementation, right? And you could do it and it might fail because you set it up poorly, or you could do it and it might actually work. I actually do think maybe 5 might be the better number. And to some extent, you kind of split it up in terms of taking into account population density, right? So Northwest, that's obvious. Southwest as well. And then maybe you have Northeast and Southeast, where they'll have a lot more geographical land to cover, but there's less population density in those areas. And of course, Tobago, because that's just practical. If you're going to do that, you have to consider one for Tobago, right? Now, to what extent they're going to be commissioners, or they're going to be assistant commissioners, or even maybe deputy commissioners? Like, to what levels of the executive are there? Do they slot in, or do they replace the commissioner? And then, of course, now, there are risks with that, because then does each sub-jurisdiction treat themselves like their own independent police service that might have rivalries with the other police services? Like Los Angeles has a sheriff's department and a police department, and I don't think they always meet eye to eye, right? Yeah. The American military services have rivalries. Our own national security services have rivalries. So it might be an overly complex solution. Maybe like something like a compromise where you still keep the genesis of the idea of having more authority in these regional subcommanders, so that they could treat with the individual quirks of each jurisdiction or sub-jurisdiction better. Like, to some extent, maybe you delineate the FUL process. So you have someone that knows the community in South giving out FELs in South, and someone that knows the community in North giving out FELs in North, as opposed to just a commissioner who, by all accounts, earlier was just signing off on things or not necessarily having any time or choosing not to spend any time to deep dive into the various things she was having to deal with. We'll close with some comments that we got at the last minute, so it's a series to start off. What evidence does the Minister of Security have to support his statements that officers duck and work? Is it senior officers or others? That was a very irresponsible and demoralizing statement, by the way. Are there issues with legitimate sick leave and extended leave with the TTBS? I think this is just one of those things where in TNT we don't have a lot of information, but everybody knows because we've seen it. Like, it's mostly anecdotal, but we've seen it firsthand. So to some extent, retired Inspector Ali can't refute what the Minister of Homeland Security, who himself was a former police officer.
And a senior one at that.
And a senior one at that, right? And I also think the context of how he said it, he's being taken a little out of context because it was in the backdrop of a certain exercise, and I don't want to call it out to throw shade on any specific group, right? But at the end of the day, and as was pointed out by one of the callers, I was pointed out by Camille and the direction of the discussion was going, and by Ashraf, this is a public service issue. We're just highlighting the police portion of it. And that's why you can't just say, well, was it irresponsible? To some extent, maybe, but the flip side to that is one could argue it's so bad that you might need more aggressive means of trying to treat with the situation, because if you passively just say, well, we have a problem, how are we going to solve it? Right now, it seems like the population doesn't have the belly. It's not just about political will. Sometimes it's about societal will, because the politicians will follow where society leads them, right? AKA property tax.
And when as the caller say, I wouldn't say it is irresponsible.
The commentator.
The comments that came, I would not say it is irresponsible. Sometimes the truth hurts.
Yeah.
And that is the reality of it. Persons abuse the process. The challenge we have is that, the impact of abuse of sick leave, legitimate order, and even legitimate sick leave has a direct impact and direct correlation in the level of service and the level and how we can perform response and service within that organization. So it is not a sick leave from abuse perspective.
Only.
It's about absenteeism from the organization for whatever reason. You will not be able to give the level of service you need and that is required by the public, or the public has an outcry with that level of service because they believe that when they call for police officers within the shortest possible time, that they need that officer or need a response. And I understand that, because when you are in a traumatic situation, a robbery just takes place. Even a motor vehicle accident is in some circumstances traumatic, just like how the person was involved in an accident on the beatum, and being involved in an accident and to be robbed at the same time.
Just to sum it up, this is the public are aware of these things in general, right? We don't have the full data, but I think this speaks to a wider problem, but including issues of leadership in the police service and in national security from the political level. So some of it, and look, at the end of the day, yes, it might not be nice, it might hurt for the police service to have these things thrown at them, but part of the issue is the officer, not all of the officers themselves help the situation with the behavior that they have towards and within the public sphere. So if it was the case that the TPS was doing everything right, then I would agree with you, this is unfair. But unfortunately, we can't say that. Part of the issue with the service is how the leadership looked and made the service look, but part of it is also how bad apples as bad examples made the service look, and that's just the reality, because the level of consequence for the work of the police, it's on a different level than, say, a ministry clerk, right? A bad ministry clerk, you'll complain about it. A bad police interaction, that could lead to some very severe consequences for a lot of people involved, right? Including the officer themselves. They don't have to intentionally be bad, right? They're human too. That's the trick. So this is a very complex situation, and this abuse of sick leave, whether fraudulent or not, is just a symptom of I think, a wider problem that can't be solved just by trying to deal with, okay, we'll solve the abuse. No, you actually have to deal with other things than that to really settle the issue and stabilize the situation. But that's it. We have to end things there. I want to thank the commentator, all of the callers, Camille, Aero Pascal, and Ashraf Ali for joining me to close out the day. Happy Indian Arrival Day. Have a good weekend, a good long weekend, of course, as we are accustomed to in Trinidad and Tobago. Heaven help us if the government decides we need to reduce public holidays. Then I think the people would riot. Until then, folks, just want to remind, we increase the price of gas, so you're going to riot, but you take away public holidays, and then,
Yes, you will.
So, folks, until then, stay safe. Remember your allegiance to the Republic and to each other, even if we are at different sides of the political divide. Make it a good weekend. Try and be positive, and never forget, it's nice to be nice. Spread that positivity. Even if it's not returned back to you, hopefully your example will help others and it will be paid forward. And until then, we will see you next week. Bye-bye.
WESN.
Her voice has mesmerized us for years.
And now, in a rare treat for music fans,
Shakuntala and Friends in concert, featuring Shakuntala Jang Bahadur. Singing sensation Deval Chaitlal, brilliant musician Dr. Shivanan Maharaj, master flautist and saxophonist Narendra Maharaj, with music from Shiv Sangeet Orchestra, Shakuntala and Friends in concert.
Shakuntala.